The coffee mug hit the kitchen counter harder than necessary. Mara's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the granite surface as she delivered the line that would change everything. I feel like a single mother in this marriage, Miles. I looked up from my laptop, where case files from 3 different investigations sprawled across the screen. The clock read 11:47 p.m. Another 16-hour day at Heron Investigations, my one-man private detective agency operating out of a converted warehouse downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been working myself into the ground, trying to provide for our family. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. Mara turned around, her blonde hair catching the under-cabinet lighting. She'd changed into her power suit, the navy blue one she wore to important meetings. At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "It means I'm done pretending this marriage works. I filed papers today." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I closed the laptop slowly, buying myself time to process what she'd just said. Filed papers for what? Divorce and full custody of Emma. Our 7-year-old daughter was asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that her world was about to implode. I thought about her gap-toothed smile when I'd managed to make it home for dinner 3 nights ago. The way she'd shown me her latest drawing, a stick figure family with Daddy written in purple crayon under the tallest figure. "Mara, we can work through whatever—" "No." She held up her hand like a traffic cop. "I've been documenting everything, Miles. The missed dinners, the forgotten school events, Emma's recital last month. You promised you'd be there." The Henderson surveillance case. I'd been sitting in a parking lot for 14 hours, finally getting the photos the client needed to prove her husband's gambling addiction. By the time I'd wrapped up, Emma's recital was over. I explained that. The case required... The case. It's always the case. Mara's voice rose slightly, then she caught herself. Everything about her seemed calculated, rehearsed. "I've been essentially raising Emma alone while you chase cheating spouses and insurance fraudsters around the city." I stood up from the kitchen stool, my joints protesting after another day hunched over surveillance equipment. At 38, I felt older than my ex-cop father had at 50. "Those cases pay for this house, for Emma's private school, for my what, Miles? My shopping habit? My spa days?" Yeah, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I work 40 hours a week in HR at Morrison Industries. I contribute to this household." She did work, and she was good at it. Employee relations, conflict resolution, managing personalities. Skills that, I was beginning to realize, she'd been practicing on me for years. "I know you work. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" I looked around our kitchen. The subway tile backsplash Mara had insisted on, the farmhouse sink, the island that cost more than my first car. All of it paid for by those insurance fraud cases and cheating spouse investigations she seemed to despise. I meant the renovations, the private school tuition, Emma's gymnastics lessons. None of that happens without the long hours. Mara's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I thought we might actually talk through this like adults. "I know you work hard, Miles, but Emma needs a father, not a ghost who leaves before she wakes up and comes home after she's asleep." She wasn't wrong. The past 6 months had been brutal. 3 major cases running simultaneously, each requiring extensive surveillance and documentation. I'd been pulling 16-hour days, sometimes sleeping in my office when a stakeout ran late. "So we adjust the caseload. I can refer some clients to other agencies." "It's too late for that." The finality in her voice made me look at her more carefully. This wasn't a frustrated wife venting about her absent husband. This was something else entirely. "What do you mean, too late?" "I mean, I've already made my decision. I've spoken with a lawyer. The papers are filed." I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. "Without even talking to me? Without trying counseling or—" "Miles, I've been trying to talk to you for months, but you're never here." That stung because it contained just enough truth to land. I had been absent. The business was finally taking off after 3 years of struggling to establish credibility in a town that remembered me as the cop who'd left the force under less than ideal circumstances. "How long have you been planning this?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Mara sighed and leaned against the counter. "A few months, since Emma's birthday party when you missed her blowing out the candles because you were on a phone call with a client." The Jameson case. A missing persons investigation that had taken a crucial turn right in the middle of Emma's party. I'd stepped outside to take the call, thinking I'd be back in 5 minutes. The conversation had stretched to 20, and by the time I'd returned, the cake was cut and Emma was asking Mommy why Daddy didn't want to see her make a wish. I came back. We sang Happy Birthday again. She knew it wasn't real, Miles. 7-year-olds aren't stupid. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'd been telling myself that working hard now would set us up for an easier future, that Emma would understand when she was older, that providing for my family was the same thing as being present for them. So, what happens now? Now you find somewhere else to stay while we work out the details. I've already spoken to Emma. I told her Daddy's work requires him to travel more, so he'll be staying in his office for a while. The casual way she delivered this information, like she was discussing weekend plans, made me realize how thoroughly she'd thought this through. You told Emma without talking to me first. I told her what she needed to hear to feel secure. I walked to the window overlooking our backyard. The swing set I'd installed last spring sat empty in the moonlight. I'd spent an entire Saturday putting it together, following Emma around the yard as she tested every component and declared it perfect, Daddy. I want to talk to Emma myself. She's asleep. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow I'm taking her to my parents' house for a few days. Give everyone some space to process this. Her parents, Richard and Patricia Caldwell, who'd never thought I was good enough for their daughter. Richard had made his feelings clear from day one. A cop's salary wasn't sufficient for the lifestyle he'd envisioned for Mara. When I'd left the force to start my own agency, his disapproval had only intensified. For how long? A week, maybe 2. Mara, you can't just take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the disruption of a contentious divorce. The word contentious hung between us. I realized she was already thinking several moves ahead, positioning herself as the protective mother shielding her child from an unreasonable father. It doesn't have to be contentious. That depends on you, Miles. I turned back to face her. What do you want? Primary custody. The house, reasonable support payments. Reasonable according to who? According to the court. I studied her face in the kitchen lighting. This was a woman I'd been married to for 9 years, dated for 2 years before that. I knew her expressions, her tells, the way her left eyebrow twitched when she was lying. But the person standing in front of me felt like a stranger. And if I fight this, then it gets complicated for everyone, especially Emma. The threat was subtle but clear. She was holding our daughter's emotional well-being hostage to ensure my compliance. I need time to think about this. Of course, take all the time you need, but I'd like you out of the house by tomorrow evening. Tomorrow? Mara, that's not reasonable. It's what's best for Emma. She doesn't need to see her parents fighting. We're not fighting. We're having a conversation. A conversation that ends with you accepting reality and moving forward constructively, or a fight that traumatizes our daughter. Your choice. I looked at her for a long moment, trying to find some trace of the woman I'd married, the woman who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd held my hand during my father's funeral, who'd cried happy tears when we'd brought Emma home from the hospital. I'll pack a bag. Thank you for being reasonable. Reasonable. As if agreeing to be exiled from my own home was the rational response to being blindsided by divorce papers. I headed toward the stairs, then stopped. Mara? Why now? What changed? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. I realized I was already living like a single mother. I figured I might as well make it official. The next morning found me sitting in my office at 6 a.m., staring at a cold cup of coffee and trying to make sense of the previous night. The converted warehouse that housed Halden Investigations felt more like home than the house I'd been asked to leave. I'd grabbed enough clothes for a week, my laptop, and the case files I'd been working on. Everything else, 9 years of marriage, a lifetime of accumulated possessions, the bedroom where Emma used to crawl into bed with us on Saturday mornings, stayed behind. My phone buzzed. A text from Nora Marlene, my lawyer, and one of the few people who'd supported my decision to leave the police force. Heard through the grapevine. Coffee in an hour? N. Small towns. News traveled faster than gossip, and gossip traveled faster than truth. By now, half the city probably knew that Miles and Mara Halden were splitting up. I texted back confirmation and tried to focus on the Henderson case files, but my mind kept drifting to Mara's words from the night before. The calculated way she'd delivered the news, the fact that she'd already spoken to Emma. How long had she been planning this? The question nagged at me as I reviewed surveillance photos from the previous week. Something about the timeline felt off. People don't just wake up one morning and decide to blow up their marriage. There's usually a catalyst, a breaking point, a final straw. For me, it had been Emma's recital, but that was just one missed event in a series of missed events. If Mara had been documenting my absences for months, what had prompted her to finally pull the trigger? My phone rang. Unknown number. Halden Investigations. Miles? It's Tessa. Mara's younger sister. We'd always gotten along well, despite the family's general disapproval of my career choices. Tessa was the black sheep, an artist who'd never held a traditional job and lived in a studio apartment downtown. "Hey, Tessa, I'm guessing you heard?" "Mara called me last night." "I'm sorry, Miles. I had no idea she was planning this." Something in her voice suggested otherwise. Tessa was a terrible liar, a quality I'd always found endearing. Now it made me suspicious. "She didn't mention anything to you? No hints that she was unhappy?" "I mean, she complained sometimes, about you working so much. But married people complain about their spouses. That's normal, right?" "What kind of complaints?" Silence on the other end. I could picture Tessa in her paint-splattered apron, chewing her lower lip the way she did when she was nervous. "Tessa? I probably shouldn't be talking to you about this. Mara would be furious if she knew I called." "She's already furious. At me. What's she been telling you?" "Just that she felt alone, like she was raising Emma by herself while you chased other people's problems around the city." The phrase sounded familiar. Too familiar. Like something Mara had rehearsed. Did she use those exact words? Chasing other people's problems around the city? Maybe. I don't remember exactly. But I could tell from her tone that she did remember, which meant Mara had been workshopping this narrative for a while, testing different versions on different audiences. "Tessa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Has Mara been seeing someone else?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Tessa? I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." "Miles, I can't—" "You can't what? You can't tell me if my wife is having an affair?" "I have to go." The line went quiet. I stared at my phone, replaying the conversation, Tessa's nervous energy, her reluctance to repeat Mara's exact words, the way she'd shut down the moment I'd asked about another man. I opened my laptop and pulled up our joint banking statements. If Mara was having an affair, there might be evidence in our financial records. Unexplained charges, hotel bills, restaurant receipts for meals I hadn't attended. What I found was worse than hotel bills. Over the past 8 months, there had been a series of transfers from our joint savings account to our checking account. Small amounts, $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Nothing that would trigger bank alerts or raise immediate red flags. But when I added them up, the total was staggering. $47,000. Nearly half our savings moved in increments over 8 months. I cross-referenced the transfer dates with my case calendar. Every single transfer had occurred while I was deep in surveillance work. The Henderson case, the Morrison insurance fraud investigation, the Patterson missing persons case, times when I was working 16-hour days and barely looking at our finances. But where had the money gone? The checking account showed normal household expenses, automatic bill payments, Emma's school tuition, nothing that would account for $47,000 in additional spending. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Nora would have to wait. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the parking lot of Morrison Industries, where Mara worked as an HR director. I'd done enough surveillance to know that the best information often came from the most unexpected sources. I walked into the lobby and approached the reception desk, where a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings looked up from her computer. "I'm here to see Mara Heron. I'm her husband." "Oh." The receptionist's eyes widened. "I'm sorry, but Mara called in sick today. She said she was taking a few personal days to deal with a family situation." Personal days. To take Emma to her parents' house, no doubt. But the timing felt convenient. File divorce papers, send the husband packing, then disappear for a few days while the dust settles. "That's fine. I actually wanted to ask you about something else. Mara mentioned she's been working with a business consultant lately. Something about professional development?" I was fishing, but the receptionist's expression suggested I'd hit something. "Oh, you mean Finn? Yeah, he's been here a lot lately. Really nice guy, very professional." "Finn." I filed the name away. "Right, Finn. I can never remember his last name." "Halden. Finn Halden. He runs some kind of consulting firm downtown. Helps businesses with efficiency and workflow optimization." "Has he been working with Mara specifically, or with the whole department?" "Mostly with Mara, I think. They've had a lot of meetings. Sometimes they work late to go over strategy stuff." Late meetings. While I was at home with Emma, or working my own late nights, Mara was having strategy sessions with a consultant named Finn Halden. "Thanks. I'll catch up with her when she gets back." I walked back to my car, my mind racing. Finn Halden, business consultant, late meetings, $47,000 in unexplained transfers. I pulled out my phone and called Sasha Kowalski, a former police tech specialist who now freelanced for private investigators. If anyone could help me trace those financial transfers, it was Sasha. Miles, I heard about you and Mara. I'm sorry, man. Thanks. Listen, I need a favor. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? I need help tracking some financial transactions. Of course. What are we looking for? Evidence of where my marriage actually went wrong. Sasha arrived at my office carrying a laptop bag and 2 cups of coffee from the diner down the street. She was in her early 30s, with short black hair and the kind of intense focus that made her invaluable during complex investigations. All right, show me what you've got, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I walked her through the bank transfers I'd discovered. $47,000 moved from savings to checking over 8 months, with no corresponding expenses in our household budget. So, the money went into your joint checking account, but then where? Sasha opened her laptop and connected to the secure network she used for financial investigations. That's what I need to find out. I also need you to look into someone named Finn Halden. He's apparently a business consultant who's been working closely with Mara. Sasha's fingers flew across the keyboard. Finn Halden. Let me see what I can find. While she worked, I called Nora to reschedule our coffee meeting and explain what I'd discovered. As a lawyer, she'd know what kind of evidence would be useful if this divorce turned ugly. Miles, slow down, Nora said when I finished explaining. You think Mara's been funneling money to this consultant? I think Mara's been planning this divorce for months, and I think this Finn guy is involved somehow. Involved how? As her lawyer? Her financial advisor? I don't know yet, but people don't just transfer $50,000 without a good reason. Okay, but be careful. If you're wrong about this, it's going to look like you're trying to manufacture evidence to discredit her in the custody hearing. Nora was right. I needed to be absolutely certain before I made any accusations. Got something, Sasha said, looking up from her laptop. Finn Halden, 37 years old, runs a consulting firm called Halden Strategic Solutions, incorporated 8 months ago. 8 months. The same time frame as the bank transfers. What kind of consulting? Business efficiency, workflow optimization, leadership development, pretty generic stuff. But here's what's interesting. His business registration lists the initial investment as $50,000. I felt my stomach drop. 50,000? Give or take a few hundred. Want me to dig deeper into his financial records? Please. Sasha's investigation skills were legendary. During her time with the police department, she'd cracked financial fraud cases that had stumped federal investigators. If there was a connection between Mara's transfers and Finn's business, she'd find it. Miles, you need to see this. Sasha turned her laptop toward me. I pulled Halden Strategic Solutions business banking records. Look at the deposit history. The screen showed a series of deposits over the past 8 months. The amounts and dates matched Mara's transfers exactly. $2,000 on March 15th, $3,500 on April 2nd, $5,000 on April 28th. Every single transfer from our savings account had been deposited into Finn Halden's business account within 24 hours. She's been funding his business with our money, I said, staring at the screen. It gets worse. Look at this. Sasha pulled up another document. Halden Strategic Solutions client list. There was only one client. Morrison Industries, Mara's employer. He's billing Morrison for consulting services, and Morrison is paying him with money Mara transferred from your joint account. It's like a financial shell game. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what we'd discovered. Mara hadn't just been planning our divorce, she'd been systematically stealing from our savings to fund her boyfriend's fake consulting business. Can you trace how Morrison is paying him? Already on it. Sasha's fingers danced across the keyboard. Morrison Industries pays Halden Strategic Solutions $8,000 per month for ongoing consultation services. But here's the kicker. The payments are authorized by Mara Heron in her capacity as HR director. The scope of the fraud was breathtaking. Mara was transferring our money to Finn, who was then billing her employer for fake consulting work, which Mara was approving in her official capacity. They were essentially laundering our savings through Morrison Industries. How is this legal? It's not, Sasha said grimly. This is embezzlement, fraud, and probably a dozen other felonies. If Morrison's executives find out, Mara's looking at criminal charges. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Mara. Emma wants to say goodnight. Can you call in 10 minutes? I stared at the message, thinking about my daughter at her grandparents' house, probably confused about why Daddy wasn't there to read her a bedtime story. Meanwhile, her mother was stealing our savings to fund her affair. I need more evidence, I told Sasha. Bank records and business filings are good, but I need something that proves they're personally involved. What kind of evidence? Photos, hotel receipts, something that shows this isn't just a business relationship. Sasha nodded. I can try to recover deleted files from Mara's devices. If she's been communicating with this guy outside of work, there might be traces on her laptop or phone. Do it, but carefully. I don't want her to know we're investigating. What about the divorce proceedings? Are you going to tell your lawyer about this? I thought about Nora's warning. If I was wrong, or if I couldn't prove the affair, it would look like I was trying to destroy Mara's reputation out of spite. Not yet. I need to be absolutely certain before I make any accusations. Sasha packed up her laptop. I'll work on the data recovery tonight. Should have something for you by tomorrow morning. After she left, I called Emma at her grandparents' house. Her voice was small and confused. Daddy, when are you coming home? I'm not sure yet, sweetheart. Mommy and I are working through some grown-up problems. Is it because I was bad? The question hit me like a punch to the chest. No, Emma. This has nothing to do with you. You're perfect, and Daddy loves you very much. Mommy said you have to travel for work now. Something like that, but I'll see you soon, okay? Promise? I promise. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the city lights through the window. Somewhere out there, Mara was probably having dinner with her parents, playing the role of the abandoned wife seeking refuge from her workaholic husband. Meanwhile, Finn Halden was counting money that used to be in Emma's college fund. I thought about the past 8 months, all those late nights I'd spent working cases while Mara was supposedly home with Emma. How many of those nights had she actually been with Finn, planning their future together while systematically dismantling mine? My phone rang. Unknown number again. Heron Investigations. Miles, it's Tessa again. What's up? I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, about Mara and, and? There's something I need to tell you, but not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Where? Murphy's Bar on 5th Street. In an hour. Murphy's was a dive bar downtown, the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. I'll be there. Miles, come alone. If Mara finds out I'm talking to you, she'll never forgive me. The line went quiet. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Whatever Tessa had to tell me, it was important enough to risk her sister's anger. And based on what Sasha had discovered, I had a feeling it was going to be the final piece of a very ugly puzzle. Murphy's Bar was exactly the kind of establishment you'd expect to find in the warehouse district. Dim lighting, cracked vinyl booths, and the lingering smell of cigarettes from the days when indoor smoking was legal. I found Tessa in a corner booth, nervously shredding a cocktail napkin. Thanks for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. What's this about, Tessa? She signaled the bartender for another drink, something dark and strong, judging by the empty glass in front of her. I lied to you earlier about not knowing anything. I figured. Mara's been seeing someone. For months. Even though I'd suspected as much, hearing it confirmed felt like a physical blow. Finn Halden? Tessa's eyes widened. How did you? I'm a private investigator, Tessa. It's what I do. She took a long sip of her drink when it arrived. She made me promise not to tell anyone. Said it wasn't serious, just someone she could talk to about her problems. What kind of problems? You, mostly. How lonely she felt. How she was basically raising Emma alone while you worked all the time. I'd heard this narrative before, from Mara, from the receptionist at Morrison Industries, now from Tessa. It was becoming clear that Mara had been building her case for months, creating a story that would justify her actions and garner sympathy. When did it start? Last fall, I think. She met him through work. He was doing some kind of consulting project at Morrison. And you've been covering for her? Tessa looked miserable. She asked me to babysit Emma sometimes, said she had work events or client dinners. I thought I was helping her build her career. But you suspected it was more than that. Not at first, but then she started asking me to lie about specific things. Like if you called looking for her, I was supposed to say she was with me when she wasn't. I thought about all the times I'd called Mara during late surveillance shifts, just to check in and say goodnight to Emma. How many of those calls had gone to voicemail because she was with Finn? Did you ever meet him? Once, a couple months ago, Mara brought him to my art show downtown. What was your impression? Tessa considered the question. Charming, very smooth, the kind of guy who knows exactly what to say to make you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room. But there was something off about him, like he was performing instead of just being himself. A con man. I'd encountered enough of them during my police days to recognize the type. Finn Halden was running a long con, and Mara was his mark. Tessa, I need to ask you something important. Did Mara ever mention giving Finn money or helping him with his business? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She said she was investing in his consulting firm, that it was a good opportunity to diversify her income. How much? I don't know exactly. But she seemed really excited about it, said Finn had promised her a significant return on her investment. A significant return. Finn wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was scamming her out of our savings with promises of financial gain. Did she tell you where the investment money came from? She said it was from her savings, money she'd been setting aside from her salary. But I knew better. Mara's salary went toward household expenses and Emma's activities. The only significant savings we had were in our joint account, the account that had been systematically drained over the past 8 months. Tessa, I need you to think carefully about this. Has Mara said anything about her plans for the divorce? What she wants in terms of custody or financial arrangements? She wants full custody of Emma, says you're too obsessed with work to be a good father. The words stung, even though I'd expected them. What about finances? She thinks she's entitled to half of everything, plus support payments. Says she's been supporting your business by taking care of the household while you built your client base. It was a reasonable argument, except for one crucial detail. She'd been stealing from our joint savings to fund her boyfriend's business. Any claim to marital assets became complicated when one spouse was committing fraud. There's something else, Tessa said quietly. What? Mara's been documenting everything, taking photos of you working late, keeping a journal of all the times you missed family events. She's been building a case against you for months. This confirmed my suspicion that Mara's decision to file for divorce wasn't spontaneous. She'd been planning this systematically, gathering evidence to support her narrative while simultaneously stealing our money. Why are you telling me this, Tessa? She finished her drink and looked directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived. Because I love my sister, but what she's doing isn't right. Emma deserves better than parents who are lying and scheming against each other. And because you think I'm getting set up. I know you're getting set up. Mara's convinced herself that you abandoned your family for your career. She thinks she's justified in taking whatever she can get. I signaled the bartender for a beer, needing time to process everything Tessa had told me. Mara wasn't just leaving me. She was systematically destroying me, financially and personally, while positioning herself as the victim. What are you going to do? Tessa asked. I'm going to fight back. Miles, be careful. Mara's not the same person she used to be. This thing with Finn has changed her. She's become calculating. So have I. I left Murphy's bar with a clear understanding of what I was up against. Mara had spent months planning her exit strategy, stealing our money, and building a narrative that would ensure she got everything she wanted in the divorce. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. As a private investigator, I specialized in uncovering the truth that people tried to hide. I'd spent 3 years building a reputation for solving cases that other investigators couldn't crack. Now I was going to solve the most important case of my career, proving that my wife was a fraud. 3 weeks later, I sat in family court next to Nora Marlin, watching Mara's attorney present her case to Judge Jared Salas. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Mara sat across the aisle in a conservative black dress, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested both professionalism and maternal responsibility. She'd lost weight since our separation, which only enhanced the image of a stressed single mother struggling to hold her family together. Your Honor, Mara's attorney was saying, my client has been essentially functioning as a single parent for the past year while Mr. Heron has prioritized his business over his family responsibilities. Judge Salas was in his early 60s, with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd heard every sob story and legal maneuver in the book. He listened without expression as Mara's attorney outlined her case. Mrs. Heron works full-time while also managing all household responsibilities and childcare. Mr. Heron's work schedule has made him largely absent from his daughter's daily life. It was a compelling narrative, supported by the documentation Tessa had warned me about. Mara's attorney presented a timeline of missed school events, late dinners, and weekends spent on surveillance cases. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Heron's income from his private investigation business is irregular and insufficient to maintain the family's current standard of living. Mrs. Heron's stable employment at Morrison Industries provides the financial security their daughter needs. When it was our turn, Nora stood and approached the bench with a thick folder of documents. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that Mrs. Heron's claims about financial stability are misleading. Nora opened the folder and removed the bank statements Sasha had helped me compile. Over the past 8 months, Mrs. Heron has transferred $47,000 from the family's joint savings account to fund a business venture with Mr. Finn Halden. I watched Mara's face as Nora spoke. For the first time since the proceedings began, her composed expression cracked slightly. These transfers were made without Mr. Heron's knowledge or consent, while he was working extended hours to support the family. Mara's attorney stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. These allegations are—" "Let her finish," Judge Salas said quietly. Nora continued. "Mr. Halden operates a consulting business that lists Morrison Industries, Mrs. Heron's employer, as its sole client. Mrs. Heron, in her capacity as HR director, has been approving payments to Mr. Halden's firm using money that originated from the family's joint savings." The courtroom was completely silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming and the distant sound of traffic outside. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Heron and Mr. Halden have been engaged in a personal relationship that extends beyond their professional association." Nora presented printed emails that Sasha had recovered from Mara's deleted files. Messages between Mara and Finn discussing their future together and their plans to start fresh once the divorce was finalized. Judge Salas examined the documents for several minutes. When he looked up, his expression was grim. "Mrs. Heron, are you familiar with these financial transactions?" Mara's attorney whispered something in her ear before she answered. "Your Honor, I made some investments in Mr. Halden's consulting firm. I believed it was a sound business opportunity." "Using marital assets without your husband's knowledge?" "The money came from my personal savings." "Mrs. Heron," Judge Salas said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "the bank records clearly show these transfers originated from a joint savings account. Are you claiming this was your personal money?" Mara hesitated. "I contributed to that account from my salary." "As did your husband, Mrs. Heron. Did you inform Mr. Heron about these transfers?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you inform him about your business relationship with Mr. Halden?" Another hesitation. "No, Your Honor." Judge Salas set the documents aside and leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Heron, you've presented yourself as a financially responsible single parent who deserves primary custody and significant financial support. However, the evidence suggests you've been systematically transferring marital assets to fund a business venture with someone you're personally involved with." Mara's attorney tried to interrupt, but Judge Salas held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Mrs. Heron, you've also been approving payments from your employer to the same individual, creating what appears to be a circular financial arrangement designed to convert marital assets into personal income for your business partner." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Mara sat frozen, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling in real time. "Your Honor," Mara's attorney said, "my client's business investments have no bearing on her fitness as a parent." "Perhaps not," Judge Salas replied, "but they have significant bearing on her claims about Mr. Heron's financial irresponsibility and her own stability." Nora stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a forensic accounting of all marital assets, as well as a review of Mrs. Heron's business dealings with Mr. Halden." "Granted. I'm also ordering both parties to undergo custody evaluations before I make any decisions about parental arrangements." Mara's attorney looked like he'd been punched. "Your Honor, that's highly unusual in a case like this." "So is embezzling marital assets to fund your boyfriend's business," Judge Salas replied dryly. As we left the courtroom, I could see Mara arguing with her attorney in hushed tones. Her carefully planned strategy had just collapsed, and she was scrambling to figure out what went wrong. "That went better than I expected," Nora said as we walked toward the parking garage. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the forensic accounting and the custody evaluation. But Miles, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Mara's going to be desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things." I thought about Emma, who was still staying with Mara's parents while her mother's world fell apart. My daughter deserved better than parents who were fighting over money and custody in a courtroom, but she also deserved the truth. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like the truth was finally coming to light. 2 months later, I stood in the driveway of what used to be our family home, holding a court order that granted me temporary custody of Emma and possession of the house. The forensic accounting had been devastating for Mara's case. Not only had she stolen $47,000 from our joint savings, but the investigation had uncovered an additional $23,000 in unauthorized credit card charges. Finn Halden's consulting business had collapsed within days of the court hearing. Morrison Industries had terminated their contract and launched their own internal investigation into Mara's role in approving fraudulent payments. She'd been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of both the company's investigation and potential criminal charges. Emma ran up the front steps ahead of me, excited to be home after 2 months at her grandparents' house. She'd grown taller during our separation, and her gap-toothed smile had been replaced by permanent teeth that made her look older than her 7 years. "Daddy, can we make pancakes for dinner?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Absolutely, whatever you want." I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house felt different, emptier somehow, despite the fact that all our furniture was still in place. Mara had taken only her personal belongings when she'd moved out the previous week. Emma disappeared upstairs to her room while I walked through the house, taking inventory of what remained. The kitchen where Mara had delivered her devastating news looked exactly the same, but I felt like a different person standing in it. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Custody evaluation report came back. You're going to want to see this." I called her immediately. The evaluator interviewed Emma extensively, Nora said without preamble. Apparently, Mara had been telling her that Daddy didn't want to live with them anymore because he cared more about work than family. She told a 7-year-old that I abandoned them? It gets worse. Emma also told the evaluator that Mommy's friend Finn had been staying at Grandma's house, and that Mommy said they were going to be a new family. I felt anger rising in my chest, not just at Mara's betrayal, but at her willingness to manipulate our daughter's understanding of what had happened. "What did the evaluator recommend?" "Full custody to you, with supervised visitation for Mara. The report states that she demonstrated concerning judgment regarding age-appropriate information sharing and boundary setting with the minor child." I looked up the stairs toward Emma's room, where I could hear her talking to her stuffed animals, probably explaining why Daddy was home and Mommy wasn't. "When's the final hearing?" "Next week. But Miles, there's something else. The district attorney's office called. They're moving forward with embezzlement charges against Mara. Criminal charges." What had started as a marriage falling apart had escalated into a felony case that could send my daughter's mother to prison. "What about Finn?" "He's cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. Apparently, he's provided evidence that the whole thing was Mara's idea." "Of course he had. Con men always found a way to make themselves the victim when their schemes collapsed." I heard Emma's footsteps on the stairs and quickly ended the call with Nora. My daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding her favorite stuffed elephant. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home for dinner?" I knelt down so we were at eye level. "No, sweetheart. Mommy is staying at Grandma's house for a while longer." "Because she's sick?" "Because she made some mistakes that she needs to fix." Emma considered this with the seriousness that children bring to adult problems they don't fully understand. "Will she fix them soon?" "I don't know, Emma. But what I do know is that you're safe here with me, and that's not going to change." She nodded and wandered back toward the living room, apparently satisfied with my explanation. I started making pancakes, thinking about how to rebuild our lives in the aftermath of Mara's deception. Emma would need therapy to process what had happened. I'd need to figure out how to explain why Mommy wouldn't be around very much anymore. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were moving forward instead of just surviving. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Heron Investigations." "Miles, it's Tessa." "Hey, how are you holding up?" "Not great. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. Mara's really angry about the custody decision. She's been saying some pretty intense things about you." "What kind of things?" "That you manipulated the court, that you turned Emma against her, that you're going to pay for destroying her life." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Tessa, do you think she'd try to do something to hurt Emma or me?" "I don't know. The Mara I grew up with would never hurt a child. But the person she's become, I just think you should be careful." After I hung up, I checked the locks on all the doors and windows. Then I called Detective Paul Green, my former partner from the police force. "Paul, I need a favor. Can you have patrol cars swing by my house more frequently for the next few weeks?" "What's going on?" I explained the situation, the divorce, the embezzlement charges, Mara's threats. "I'll make sure the night shift knows to keep an eye on your place," Paul said. "But Miles, if she violates the custody order or makes any direct threats, call me immediately." "I will." That night, I tucked Emma into her own bed for the first time in 2 months. She seemed happy to be home, chattering about school and her friends and the art project she wanted to work on over the weekend. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I'm glad you're home." "Me too, Emma. Me too." As I turned off her light and headed downstairs, I realized that despite everything we'd been through, we were going to be okay. Mara had tried to destroy our family to build a new life with Finn, but she'd only succeeded in destroying herself. The house felt like home again. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Judge Solis's courtroom was packed for the final custody hearing. Word had spread through the legal community about the case. The HR director who'd embezzled marital assets to fund her affair partner's business had become something of a cautionary tale. Mara sat at the defendant's table looking pale and drawn. The confident woman who'd announced our divorce in our kitchen had been replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "Mrs. Heron," Judge Salas said, reviewing the custody evaluation report, "the evidence presented to this court paints a troubling picture of your judgment and priorities during your marriage." Mara's new attorney, her previous lawyer had withdrawn from the case, stood up. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that she made poor financial decisions, but that doesn't affect her love for her daughter or her fitness as a parent." "Doesn't it?" Judge Salas replied. "Mrs. Heron systematically stole from her family's savings to fund a relationship with another man. She lied to her 7-year-old daughter about why her father was absent. She attempted to manipulate this court with false claims about her husband's financial irresponsibility while engaging in embezzlement herself." The judge set down the report and looked directly at Mara. "Mrs. Heron, you presented yourself as a responsible single mother deserving of primary custody and financial support. The evidence shows you were actually stealing from your own child's future to fund an affair." Mara started to speak, but Judge Salas held up his hand. "I hereby award full custody of Emma Heron to her father, Miles Heron. Mrs. Heron will be granted supervised visitation rights, pending the outcome of the criminal charges against her." The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. As people filed out, I caught sight of Finn Halden in the back row. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd first learned his name. His consulting business was gone, his reputation destroyed, and he was facing his own legal troubles despite his cooperation with prosecutors. Mara walked past me without making eye contact, her parents flanking her like bodyguards. Richard Caldwell shot me a look of pure hatred, as if I was somehow responsible for his daughter's downfall. Outside the courthouse, Nora and I stood on the steps watching the late afternoon traffic. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I won, but at a cost I never wanted to pay." "Emma's going to be fine, Miles. Kids are resilient." I thought about my daughter, who was spending the afternoon with Sasha while I attended the hearing. She'd adapted to our new normal with the flexibility that children possess, but I knew she'd carry the scars of her mother's choices for years to come. What happens to Mara now? The criminal case goes to trial next month. Given the evidence and Finn's cooperation, she'll probably plead guilty and hope for probation. And if she doesn't? Prison time, maybe 2 to 5 years for embezzlement and fraud. I watched Mara get into her parents' car across the street. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd destroyed her life, chasing a fantasy with a con man who'd thrown her under the bus the moment things got difficult. But then I thought about Emma asking if Mommy was coming home for dinner, and the sympathy faded. "Come on," I said to Nora. "I need to go pick up my daughter." As we walked toward the parking garage, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You haven't won anything. This isn't over." I showed the message to Nora, who immediately called Detective Green. But I wasn't worried. Mara had already lost everything that mattered. Her daughter, her home, her career, her freedom. Whatever threats she wanted to make from the ruins of her life, they couldn't touch what I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. I drove home to my daughter, to our house, to our future. Mara had wanted to make it official that she was a single mother. Mission accomplished.